Welcome back. Joining me now is Ian Sams, senior national spokesman for the Harris-Walz campaign and a former White House staffer. Ian, thanks so much for being with me this afternoon. I really appreciate it.
Thanks.
We are going to talk policy, of course, but I have to start with Tuesday's all-important debate. We have learned now that the rules are set. The microphones will be turned off when the other person is speaking. We know that that's not what you guys were pushing for. So tell me what your reaction is to this.
Yeah, it's a little disappointing. I think the vice president really felt strongly about having the microphones unmuted so that the American people could see a real debate with real exchanges between the two candidates back and forth. I think you think about the sort of viral moments of her that people remember from her time in the Senate, where Trump appointees were before the Judiciary Committee, the way she's incisive in her questioning, asking them to draw out the truth and the facts about what they are talking about. Having that taken away from her in this debate is a challenge. And I think, we wish that the Trump campaign had understood that these are two different candidates than there were a few months ago, and that it was very clear that the Trump campaign wanted to keep a muzzle on their candidate so that they could try to instill some discipline. I think they were worried about what might happen in those exchanges with the vice president, and we're trying to sort of keep him under control. And I think, look, to their point, it's probably good for them. It's probably helpful. It's going to help Donald Trump stay under control and calmer and more disciplined and restrained. In June, for example, in the debate, he lied over and over again, but maybe he seemed a little bit more normal because he couldn't be interrupting and interjecting all the time. And so, look, this is a guy who's a showman. I think he knows how to perform in debates like this. I think he knows how to get ready for the big lights on TV. And he's a very experienced debater at this point. This is his 7th general election presidential debate, which is probably the most of anybody in history. And, I think that we're looking to see that they're probably ready to have him seem a little bit more restrained and normal for the country.
Ian, I hear you trying to lower expectations. Is there a reason you're doing that?
It's interesting, this lowering expectations question. I mean, Donald Trump is in Sean Hannity's town hall in Pennsylvania attacking ABC, claiming conspiracy theories about we're going to get the questions ahead of time. And, people aren't really talking about that as Donald Trump lowering expectations.
Well, to be fair, we are talking about that, too. But since I'm interviewing you, I just want to put the question to you. Why are you lowering expectations?
I'm just telling the truth. I think it's a little bit dispiriting that the mute button is going to be on for the debate and prevent the candidates from being able to go back and forth. But look, regardless of that, the vice president is going to come to the debate ready to talk about the choice in the election, the choice between his economic vision and her economic vision, trickle down and big corporations and big billionaires getting tax cuts, help for small business and working people. She's going to paint the choice of the vision. She's going to talk about how we can turn the page on Donald Trump and move into the future with a new way forward for the country. Those are things she's going to be ready to talk about. She's excited to be able to do that. I think that it's just a matter of, as we talk about the rules, talking about some of the unfortunate decisions, I think, that were made to continue pushing for the muted microphones by the Trump campaign.
Let me ask you now about some policy. Obviously, the vice president has been rolling out the details of her economic policy. She's signaled that she supports part of President Biden's proposed budget that contains new tax policy. So, question for you, this is a yes or no question. Does that include his billionaire's minimum tax that would effectively tax unrealized capital gains for Americans with wealth above $100 million?
Yeah, well, the vice president actually talked about this yesterday. I think that she sees the proposal she put forward on capital gains and investment in entrepreneurship and startups in this country as appropriate in balance with the suite of proposals that she's also for, which includes a billionaire minimum tax, which includes quadrupling taxes on stock buybacks, which includes
so that's a yes, Gian, just to be clear, that's a yes?
A higher corporate tax rate. We saw Trump today talk about this. Yeah, she said that she's for the billionaire minimum tax and stressed that again yesterday. And I think, again, the reason I put all these things together is I think she rejects the false choice that we can either be for using the tax code to foster investment and growth in our startup and entrepreneur community and taking on those at the very top and the very wealthy. She thinks that we can do both. And she thinks that some of the proposals that we've seen, including President Biden's budget blueprint of 39.6% for those long-term capital gains, that's a little bit too high for how she sees how we can incentivize investing in startups and entrepreneurs. But when it comes to things like the billionaire minimum tax, the raising the corporate tax rate, the stock buyback, tripling or quadrupling, the rate on those, that's a suite of really strong proposals that targets those at the very top to ensure that we create more revenue to pay for really important priorities for the middle class.
Ian, you take me to my next question because you're talking about entrepreneurs and startups, and Congressman Khanna actually pushed back on the idea, saying exactly that this is going to stifle startups, that it could hurt entrepreneurs. How do you counter that? And quite frankly, that opposition coming from within your own party, one of her top surrogates saying that.
Well, I was watching Congressman Khanna actually yesterday talk about her proposal that she announced in New Hampshire about the lower capital gains rate than what President Biden has proposed, and he was saying that he thinks this makes sense, that this is a good suite of proposals and a smart plan to help small businesses and increase entrepreneurship and startups in this country. And so, I think that every Democrat and every Republican aren't going to agree on everything. But I think that at the end of the day, Congressman Khanna, many other Democrats have spoken out to say Vice President Harris is putting forward a real plan that helps small businesses and working people, which is such a contrast to what we're seeing from President Trump. And you guys talked about this with Vaughn, his announcements at the New York Economic Club, where he's pushing even more tax cuts for corporations, even more tax cuts for those at the top. So it's just a really stark difference between the two.
Let me ask you, broadly speaking, because she has put out a number of proposals, including a ban on price gouging, as you just laid out, a smaller increase in the capital gains tax. But how should people think about a Harris administration as compared to a Biden administration? Where will the big differences be? Will there be any big differences, Ian?
Well, yeah, you're starting to see some of these areas where they disagree a little bit on how to get the policies
around
done.
the edges. Around the edges.
I think at the end of the day, they're very different candidates. I think the country and voters view them as different people. I think that people can see that President Biden and Vice President Harris aren't the same person. And I think that when Vice President Harris talks about her values and priorities, when you think about something like the price gouging proposal, this is someone who spent 15 years, 20 years of their career as a prosecutor taking on special interests, big, powerful interests on behalf of regular people who've been wronged by them. And so you can think about her policy proposals in terms of understanding that there are really big, powerful interests out there who are screwing over regular people, and we need to actually use our policy programs to take them on in order to give relief to some people. That's something that I think, we haven't talked a ton about over the last 4 years. But again, I think there's places that she can continue to roll out ideas and talk about for the American people that may be a little bit of a distinction from President Biden. And I think the other thing is putting forward ideas that grow on and expand upon progress that we've made under President Biden.
Ian, let me ask.
I don't think it has to be. I think there's a little bit of a shorthanding that maybe there's some massive break or something. I think there are places where they disagree. They're different candidates, but at the end of the day, there have been amazing successes under this administration. And what she's putting forward are ideas of how to build on that and to talk to the American people about her own values and her own vision for doing this that is unique to her as a candidate.
Ian, I want to ask you about price gouging because a lot of questions about how practically that would play out. For example, would the government set a maximum price on food and groceries?
No, I think that the Republicans now suddenly, which is actually interesting. Let's talk about this for a second. Donald Trump and Republicans have been attacking her for somehow this is price controls, which it isn't. Economists have come out and said it absolutely isn't.
But economists have also expressed concerns with the plan.
But what's interesting about this price gouging proposal is 40 states already have price gouging proposals on the books. There's just not a federal law. And in fact, there's been bipartisan legislation, Republicans and Democrats in Congress, who have put forward suggestions that we take on corporate price gouging at the federal level. And so it's interesting that suddenly ideas that Republicans used to support are being attacked by Republicans once the Democratic nominee for president, Kamala Harris, proposes them. And so I think that there's some game playing happening here by those on the right when what the vice president's talking about is easing the burden on people when corporations are charging too much than they should be on products in moments of vulnerability. I think we've seen this. You actually have seen a lot of conversation in the press and in the economic news over the last year or two about shrinkflation, for example, selling a smaller product for the same price as a larger product used to be. Well, those are the kind of corporate behavior that she's talking about wanting to take on in order to bring down prices for the American people.
Ian, before I let you go, I do have to ask you about the developing news right now. Hunter Biden in court on the tax-related charges that he is facing. We anticipate he's going to enter a plea deal. That has not happened yet, though. That is our reporting. That's our anticipation. As president, would Vice President Harris pardon him, or is that off the table?
Well, you've heard President Biden make the commitment that that wouldn't happen. I wouldn't imagine that changing with Vice President Harris.
Is she committed to that?
Obviously, you know, the case is still ongoing, and we want to be really careful and respectful of the court process. I don't think that this should be politicized from the Harris campaign. So
understood. I mean, President Biden has taken it off the table. Has the vice president taken it off the table?
Well, I just answered. I said I think that she's not planning to pardon anyone. But again, I think it's important to understand there's no sentence or anything like that happening right now. And so, you know, I would leave this question to the White House and to President Biden, and obviously to Hunter Biden and his personal team.
All right, Ian Sams, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.